Well, the emotional homecoming for Coach Josh Heupel is just one night's sleep away as Tennessee makes its return to Norman. Josh Heupel makes his return to Norman for the first time in 10 years. Here we'll talk about a little bit of the X's and O's between Tennessee and Oklahoma, Paige Dauer, Jimmy Hyams. I think when we look beyond, the emotional return, the return to Norman, which we had talked about on the field pass on Monday and Thursday, here, it's the first SEC matchup with both of these teams being SEC teams. It's a chance for Tennessee to continue, bolstering its argument to being a playoff team. So when you look at it through that lens, how important is it for them to start 1-0 in SEC play?
I think it's huge. I think it's huge for Tennessee. I think for both teams, it pretty much defines the direction that they're going to go. Now, I understand that things can change, but I think whoever wins this game really puts himself in a position, in particular Tennessee, of being a college football playoff team. Oklahoma, to me, even if with a win, it's at home, and their schedule is more difficult down the road.
Yeah.
So if Oklahoma loses this game, I don't see any chance they get in the college football playoff. Even if they win it, it's going to be a hard row. If Tennessee wins it, I really believe this puts Tennessee in great position for college football playoff, because you've beaten two of the teams that I thought were difficult opponents. NC State, as it turned out, wasn't.
Yeah.
Now you got Oklahoma. The two best teams left on your schedule are Alabama and Georgia.
Right.
And if you lose those two and you go 10-2, there's still a good chance you can make the college football playoff.
Yeah, and when we look at, this game being on the road in Norman, Oklahoma has done really well at home. I saw a stat from ESPN Stats and Info, and it said, since 1978, when is the last time Oklahoma as a ranked team was more than a 4-point underdog at home. Right now they're about a touchdown and a half underdog at home. So kind of how do you see maybe the narrative changing after looking at what both teams have done through 3 games?
I've learned not to pay a whole lot of attention to point spreads.
Yes.
Because if you did, they hadn't been close on a Tennessee game yet, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't pay attention to that. What I pay attention to is that in the last 10 years, Oklahoma's only lost 5 home games.
Yeah.
And they had a losing record one of those seasons
Oh, wow.
in the last 10 years. Yet, again, they've lost only 5 home games in 10 years. They're tough to beat in Norman. And so Tennessee should and will go in with the proper respect for Oklahoma. Have the Sooners been as impressive as Tennessee? No. But I would suggest that Houston and Tulane, two of Oklahoma's opponents, are every bit as good as North Carolina State.
Yeah.
And so they've played a more difficult schedule than Tennessee. But their offense has struggled a little bit. They only average 325 yards a game on offense. So I pay more attention to that than I do a point spread. Every week I see point spreads that end up being way out of whack when you look at the final result. I'm a little surprised Tennessee's favored by that much, but I think the folks in Vegas are impressed by the fact that Tennessee's averaging over 60 points a game.
Right. And then when we look at it being a road game, how much do you think them being in this away setting, they've only had 2 neutral site games under Nico Iameleava, how much is it a factor that they are truly on the road and what Oklahoma fans believe will be a hostile environment? How much does that play into Tennessee having success on Saturday?
I think it helps just a little bit that you've had 2 neutral site games with Nico as your starter. Because even in the game at Charlotte, based on who I talked to, the crowd was close to 50-50.
Yeah.
It's a completely different deal when you go into somebody's venue and they're screaming and yelling. Every time you try to snap the ball, they're making a lot of noise. It's just a different situation when you got that many people. Nico said before the year that he likes playing on the road more than he does at home. We're going to find out. And he said that he didn't mean to disparage the Neyland fans because he understands it's great to play in Knoxville. But he likes that challenge of going on the road. We'll see if he's up to it. We'll see if the team's up to it. But it's a completely different ball game when you play in a stadium that seats well over 80,000. And they're yelling and screaming at you versus a neutral site where it's about 50-50.
Yeah, I wonder if he feels he's getting that edge back from, like, his high school days where you did have road games, because here at Tennessee, he's, again, not had a true road game as a starter or really even finding any playing time in those matchups. But when we look at it kind of on the X's and O's standpoint, and we've got Nico Iameleava, his wide receivers that he's been able to connect with quite well this season. They have a handful of explosive plays under their belt. Do you see them being able to continue that level of production on Saturday?
Well, not that level of production. I do see him being efficient and productive. I don't see him scoring 60-something points.
Yes.
They're averaging over 600 yards a game. They're
Right.
not going to get, I don't think, 600-plus yards against Oklahoma.
No, because even when Hendon Hooker was here, it was 525, and that was
Yeah,
their
yeah,
average,
yeah.
and that had you number
Yeah,
one in the country. So
Yeah. So, and Oklahoma's got a really good defense now. That's the strength of their team, their defense. It is stout. So I think Tennessee's passing game will be efficient. I think Nico will be efficient. What he's got to do is avoid the mistakes. He had 2 interceptions against North Carolina State.
yeah.
He got hit on one of them, which I had trouble blaming him for that. And on the other one, we heard later that Josh Heupel said the receiver broke his route off. So that was more the blame of the receiver than
Sure.
Nico. But if Nico continues to pass as accurately as he has, and I think he's an extraordinarily accurate passer,
Right.
I think Tennessee's very talented at receiver. I was watching the other day where Randall Cobb, who's a product of Alcoa High School, played at Kentucky. He ranked Tennessee's receiving corps in the SEC 5th. I would argue that one.
Interesting. Yeah,
I would
too.
argue that, and I think they're better than 5th in the league. I'd probably put them in the top 3.
Yeah.
So I think you've got targets to throw to. They're going to get open. You got some big bodies. You got an accurate quarterback. So far, the pass protection has been pretty good. I do think Tennessee would throw the ball effectively against Oklahoma. Now, what does that mean? Is it that he goes 20 for 30 for 250 yards? If you're a Tennessee fan, I think you'd take that.
You'd be happy with that. So I guess who on defense for Oklahoma is kind of maybe catching your eyes at the defensive line, where it starts with R. Mason Thomas, and he's the defensive player of the week for, nationally. He had 3 sacks against Tulane. All of that came in the second half. They looked incredibly focused in the second half, despite that second half or fourth quarter performance. They've looked very middle of the road, pedestrian so far. But seeing what they did against Tulane, is it now the defensive line that has your attention, or is it staying back in the secondary?
It's the front 7,
Yeah.
because I think Stutzman's a tremendous linebacker. He's a really good football player, all-conference caliber player, maybe even a level above that. We'll see.
Yeah.
The defensive line is really good. They put a lot of pressure on you. I think they've got 11 sacks as a team so far.
Yeah.
So their front 7, I think, is the best part of their defense. I think the secondary is pretty good, but I would rate the front 7 as the best unit on that team, period.
So then when we look at the growth that Dylan Sampson has had, because, you'll look back to, the games of last year and you're like, oh, this game's tailor-made for Jalen Wright, or it's tailor-made for, Dylan Sampson to have a big game. Do you think that now he's a more complete running back, that despite that front 7 or, what their front 4 will even try and show them, that he still will be able to have similar success on Saturday?
I think he'll have success. If he gets 100 yards, that's a big win for Tennessee. If he gets 80, I think that's really good. I'll be curious to see, though, with Oklahoma, their front 7 is so good. I wonder if they will not feel a need to load the box and feel like, okay, our group up front can handle Tennessee. And if they spread, we may spread with them, but our group up front's good enough to neutralize Tennessee's offensive line in their run game. That's going to be an interesting matchup. I think so much of this comes down to how well Tennessee's offensive line plays.
Sure.
But I love Sampson. I think he's a great back. I'm hard-pressed to find a back in the SEC that I think is better than Dylan Sampson. I think he's already got, 9 touchdowns this year?
Yes, he does more than he did a year ago. He had 8 a year ago.
Yeah, so I think that they'll be able to run it effectively. And I don't know why people, and I heard it on ESPN the other day, why they keep talking about this air raid Tennessee offense. It's not air raid.
It really hasn't been since Heupel got here.
They balance it.
Yes.
You load the box, they throw it. You spread out, they run it. Pretty simple, and it's effective. And I think that they're very good play callers. And by the way, I will guarantee you that Josh Heupel is going to pull a few tricks out of his bag that he hasn't used yet. I know he's saving some stuff. He hadn't had to use it, but I bet he's saving some stuff for Oklahoma.
Yeah, if it goes Tennessee's way, do you see Josh Heupel doing to Oklahoma what he did to Missouri at home a couple of years ago, where he just poured it on thick even late in the game?
Yeah, I think he would.
I think he had good reason to stand on business this time.
And look, I didn't like what he did against Missouri, and I think they paid for it the next year. Missouri had that game circle on their schedule. I'm not a big fan of that, but if he gets a chance against Oklahoma, the school that fired him after the 2014 season, I think he'll tack one on and enjoy it. Now, will he have that opportunity? I'm not throwing this off as Tennessee's going to rout Oklahoma. I'm not in that camp. I think it's going to be a challenge for Tennessee to win. But I have a lot of respect for Oklahoma. And look, I've seen teams kind of meander through the first part of their season, but then when they get to big game, they rise to the occasion. Oklahoma could do that. I think they have a better team than the way they have played so far.
Do you think in this game then, because I know even after Kent State we talked a lot about, the 12-team personnel, you get 2 tight ends out there. Will we see that a lot or maybe a bit more in this game now that they kind of exercise what that looked like against Kent State and they had success? Do you see maybe them doing that because we keep talking about the front 7 and maybe needing to, create their own momentum? Do you see maybe the 2 tight end look in this game?
I don't know, and here's why. If the strength of Oklahoma's team is their run defense, which it is, they give up 77.7 yards a game rushing.
Yes.
They're tough to run against. So do you come in and say, look, we're not going to be hard-headed. We're going to spread the field, and we're going to take advantage of our receivers. Now, the 12 personnel worked against this team, but maybe it's better to spread it out against Oklahoma and have success in the passing game and force them to spread out with you to give you the favorable numbers in the box. So it's a chess match that they're going to be playing. So I just think it depends on what Oklahoma does on defense, and I also think it depends on how successful Tennessee might be throwing the football early in that game, because I do expect them to go in that direction. I don't think they're going to line up in a 12 personnel and try to ram it at Oklahoma at the start of the game.
Yeah,
now, they might. But and the other thing about, and a lot of people don't talk about with Tennessee, they're creative in their run game. They have a lot of different blocking schemes, whether it's pulling the guard and attacker, whether it's pulling a center, whether it's trap blocking with an H-back. They do a lot of different things in the blocking scheme, which I think makes their run game even more effective.
So then you think if they are trying to spread the field, is it important that, you get to Brew McCoy in the middle of the field, or you get into Squirrel and Brazel, out on the perimeter? Is it just like a blessing that they have so much depth right now that you probably could attack them in all 3 phases back there?
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that Heupel pointed out that Mike Matthews, the freshman, he came back from Kent State and made a couple of really big plays.
Yeah.
So, the depth that they have at receiver, the fact they can easily go 4 wides with talented guys, that's going to be a huge challenge for Oklahoma. And I would bet you they're going to run some 4 wides. How often, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're going to throw a lot at them and really press Oklahoma's defense to keep up with them. So I'm really eager to see what Tennessee's game plan is against Oklahoma's defense.
Yeah, definitely. And then, the last couple of things, when we look over to Oklahoma on their offense, they've got their sophomore quarterback in Jackson Arnold. He completes about 60% of his passes. Usually he's got 7 scores on the year. Do you see them maybe trying to keep an up-tempo offense? How do you think, Arnold and that offense is going to try and attack Tennessee's defense?
Yeah, I think they will go up-tempo. I watched their Tulane game, and I watched their Murray State game early in the year. Arnold is not a consistently accurate passer.
Right.
But he's a really good runner. He leads the team in rushing. Now,
yeah, he does.
and the thing is,
interesting.
He only averages 53 yards rushing per game.
Yeah.
They are not elite at running back. They got a couple of nice running backs, but they don't have a Dylan Sampson.
No, they don't.
And when their offense only averages 325 yards a game, they average less than 170 yards rushing and less than 170 yards passing. So they have not been nearly as proficient offensively as I thought they would be, and I'm sure as they thought they would be. If you're Tennessee, you got to contain Jackson Arnold, in particular in the run game. He ran for about 95 yards against Tulane.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means you put a spy on him. I don't know if that means when you rush, you stay in your lanes to make sure he doesn't break contain.
Sure.
But whatever you do, you cannot let him get loose and run for 90-something yards against you. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. He will complete some passes. He's going to do that. but I just thought his accuracy has been a little bit suspect so far.
Yeah, so do you think that this is a game where the linebackers will make kind of a key difference? I know the secondary really hasn't been tested, but knowing that he does kind of run, the plays break down maybe a little bit, is it a game made for, Keenan Peely and Arion Carter in the linebacker room?
Yes, I do. And I think the linebackers could be a key in making sure that Jackson Arnold doesn't take off and run and gain 8, 10, 12, 15 yards,
Yes.
which he did against Tulane. So, yeah, I think this is a big game for Tennessee's linebackers to play well.
Yeah, and then if we do look to the secondary for, Tennessee, it's guys like Deion Burks who might try and go out there and exploit them. They do have a couple of guys coming back from injury or just being nicked up in that wide receiver room. Do you see them maybe having much of a threat? I mean, some of them are even making their debut potentially in this game.
Yeah, so Deion Burks is a transfer from Purdue. He leads them in receiving. He is a good wide receiver, but he only averages 7.7 yards a catch, right?
Yeah.
Their top 3 receivers all average less than 10 yards a catch. They get Nick Anderson back, probably.
Yes.
And I think he is a big play threat. He's really good. Last year he caught 38 passes. He turned those into 10 touchdowns. He averaged 21 yards a reception last year. This guy's and I think he's about 6'4", and he can run. So that to me, I thought he was their best receiver going into the season, but he's been injured. So adding him to the equation is certainly going to help Oklahoma's passing game, and Tennessee's going to have to pay attention to him because he is, to me, he is the biggest big play threat in their offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else on the matchup?
I will be curious to see how Tennessee utilizes. We talked a little bit about the personnel, the 12 personnel. Do they throw to the tight ends? They did that a pretty good amount against NC State.
They did, yeah.
And I wonder if that will be part of the equation or if they'll just spread it and say we're going to put our speedy receivers out there against Oklahoma. But I just think it's a great chess match. I do believe that this is a revenge game for Josh Heupel. I don't care what he says during the week. And I know that the players understand and feel that. They want to win this game for him because they love and respect playing for him. And even though Heupel says being fired was a blessing in disguise, it's still a thorn in his side. So I look for Tennessee to come out and play very emotional. But you know what? I think Oklahoma will too. That's why I think it's going to be a great ball game.
Yes, I do too. Yeah. And I think, just mentioning about whether they use the tight ends or not, I think what we saw even up until this point, and especially against Iowa, is Nico's IQ. He really does take what the defense shows you, and he still finds a way to exploit that. I think that'll really come forward in this game.
I remember talking to somebody before the season who's very knowledgeable about football, and he said, the only question I have about Nico, because this guy's seen him in practice and scrimmages so against Iowa, I want to see how well he sees the field. And I think so far he has seen the field really well.
Yeah.
That is so important. And it's going to be very important in this ball game. So there's nothing I don't like about Nico.
Yes.
And I think he's going to be an exceptional quarterback. How exceptional he'll be against Oklahoma, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think he'll have a great future at Tennessee.
Score prediction?
I've got it a lot lower than some people. I know a lot of folks around here have Tennessee blowing them out. I've got Tennessee 30-20. Now, I have trouble seeing Oklahoma scoring more than 20 because they got 16 against Houston, right?
Yes.
So, and Tennessee's defense is a lot better than that. But I don't think Tennessee's just going to go in there and roll it up and score on every possession against Oklahoma. So I've got it as a 10-point game.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be 41-21, either just a couple of field goals, missed extra point for Oklahoma, but I do think Nico will be able to find success, especially with the wide receivers. I think it'll be a big game for all of them, maybe even Squirrel White getting involved a little earlier again in this game.
Well, and he hadn't been involved much so far, but he's capable. So, I think he certainly could be a big factor.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Paige, Dauer, Jimmy Hyams, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. We'll be back Sunday morning for our post-game reactions to a hopeful Tennessee win. We'll talk to you guys then.